The one skill that changed everything. The coffee had gone cold again. She stared at it from across the kitchen counter, the same mug she'd reheated 3 times that morning. Outside, the world was moving at full speed, but inside these 4 walls, time felt both endless and impossibly short. There was a question she kept pushing down, buried under laundry and lunch prep and the constant hum of everyone else's needs. Could she really build something of her own? She wasn't chasing millions or magazine covers or some impossible version of success that required abandoning everything she'd built as a mother. She was chasing something quieter, something that felt almost radical in its simplicity. Freedom. The kind that fits between nap times and school pickups. The kind that doesn't ask her to choose between being present and being herself. But freedom felt like a luxury reserved for other people. People with more time, more money, more certainty about where to begin. She scrolled through her phone during those stolen moments when the house finally went quiet. Business ideas, side hustles, passive income strategies. Everything sounded either too complicated or too good to be true. Start a podcast. Launch a course. Build a brand. The advice was everywhere, but it all assumed she had resources she didn't have, capital connections, hours of uninterrupted focus. What she had was 20 minutes here, an hour there, and the persistent feeling that she was somehow failing at both motherhood and ambition by wanting more than what her days currently held. Part of her still felt guilty for wanting more, as if ambition had to disappear when motherhood began. As if dreams came with expiration dates, and hers had quietly passed while she was busy keeping everyone else alive and fed and loved. But the idea didn't come from a business book or a motivational video or some guru promising overnight transformation. It came from the mess on her kitchen table, a broken toy she'd repaired with a YouTube tutorial. A birthday invitation she'd designed because she couldn't afford to order one. A friend's question about how she always knew exactly what to say when someone was struggling. The skill was already there. She just hadn't been calling it by name. Virtual assistants. The words felt sterile, corporate, like something that required a business degree and years of experience in an office she'd never worked in. But when she started researching what virtual assistants actually did, something shifted. Email management, calendar scheduling, social media posting, customer service, basic graphic design, research, data entry, content creation. These weren't mysterious corporate skills. These were things she did every single day, just without payment or recognition, or the belief that they held any market value. She thought about how she coordinated playdates and doctor's appointments and school events, juggling 5 different schedules without missing a beat. How she managed the family budget, tracking expenses and finding deals and making every dollar stretch further than it should. How she'd learned Canva to make birthday invitations, figured out social media algorithms to stay connected with friends, taught herself basic photo editing to preserve family memories. What if these weren't just survival skills? What if they were marketable skills? The doubt came quickly, the way it always did. Who would pay her for things she'd been doing for free? Why would a business owner trust someone who hadn't worked in an office in years? Maybe success just wasn't meant for someone like her. Someone whose resume had gaps and whose last performance review was a distant memory from another lifetime. She almost closed the laptop. Almost convinced herself that wanting this was selfish, impractical, another fantasy that would only lead to disappointment. But then she found a story. A mother of 3 who started offering virtual assistants for $5 an hour, just to prove she could do it. Within 6 months, she was charging $50 an hour and turning down clients. Another woman who specialized in helping overwhelmed entrepreneurs manage their inboxes, building a full-time income by working 20 hours a week. A former teacher who used her organizational skills to become a virtual assistant for online course creators, earning more than she had in the classroom while working from her couch. These women weren't extraordinary. They were just like her, tired, underpaid, underestimated, and absolutely capable. She smiled, not because it was easy, but because it was finally starting to feel possible. According to recent data, the virtual assistant industry is expected to reach over $30 billion by 2030, with demand growing exponentially as more businesses operate remotely. Small business owners, entrepreneurs, and busy professionals are desperately seeking help with administrative tasks, and they're willing to pay well for reliable, skilled support. The barrier to entry is remarkably low. No fancy certifications required. No expensive equipment beyond a laptop and internet connection. No need to pitch yourself as an expert when you can start by simply being helpful. What would you have done in her place? Would you have kept scrolling, or would you have leaned into the uncomfortable possibility that you were already more qualified than you believed? She decided to test the water. She created a simple profile on Upwork, describing herself honestly. Stay-at-home mom with strong organizational skills, attention to detail, and a genuine desire to help businesses run smoothly. She listed the software she knew, even if she'd learned it through YouTube tutorials and trial and error. Canva, Google Workspace, Microsoft Office, basic social media platforms, email management. Her first proposal felt like sending a message in a bottle into an endless ocean. She offered to help a small business owner organize their overflowing inbox for $10 an hour, half of what others were charging, just to get her foot in the door. The response came faster than she expected. Not because her proposal was perfect, but because it was human. She didn't oversell or use corporate jargon. She simply said she understood what it felt like to be overwhelmed and that she was really good at creating order from chaos. Then came the doubt. The kind that whispers louder than failure. What if she messed up? What if they realized she wasn't a real professional? What if her kids interrupted a call, or she couldn't figure out their systems, or she proved every fear she'd ever had about herself, but she showed up anyway? She logged in during nap time, worked through email chains while her toddler watched cartoons, learned new software after bedtime by watching tutorials at double speed. The work wasn't glamorous. Sorting emails, scheduling meetings, updating spreadsheets, responding to customer inquiries, but it was hers, and it was paying her. Not much at first, but enough to feel the shift. From invisible labor to valued skill, from dependency to agency, from wondering if she still had anything to offer the world to knowing, with quiet certainty, that she did. Her second client came through a referral, then a third. Each one taught her something new. How to set boundaries around her availability. How to communicate professionally without apologizing for her circumstances. How to price her work based on value, not desperation. She learned that businesses weren't looking for perfection, they were looking for reliability. Someone who showed up, followed through, and made their lives easier. Someone who responded to messages promptly, caught mistakes before they became problems, and treated their business like it mattered. Sometimes growth doesn't look like progress. It looks like staying. Staying consistent when results are slow. Staying committed when doubt creeps in. Staying present to the small wins that don't show up on social media but change everything internally. 6 months in, she was earning enough to cover groceries. A year in, she was matching what she would have made in a part-time job, but with complete control over her schedule. 18 months in, she was earning more than she had in her previous career, working fewer hours, and choosing clients whose values aligned with hers. Her workspace was still her kitchen counter. Her office hours were still fragmented and strange, woven between school drop-offs and dinner prep. But it no longer felt like chaos. It felt like possibility. She started noticing something that surprised her. The skills she'd developed as a mother, the ones she'd dismissed as mundane or worthless, were exactly what made her valuable as a virtual assistant. Her ability to anticipate needs before they were spoken, her patience with repetitive tasks, her talent for diffusing tense situations with empathy and clarity, her knack for managing multiple priorities without losing her mind. Motherhood hadn't been a career gap. It had been training. She began specializing, leaning into what felt natural rather than forcing herself into areas that didn't. Some virtual assistants focused on social media management, others on bookkeeping or graphic design or tech support. She found her niche in client communication and inbox management, helping overwhelmed business owners respond to customers with warmth and efficiency. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no single moment when everything changed. Just a series of small decisions, each one building on the last. Say yes to the opportunity. Show up even when it's inconvenient. Ask for feedback. Raise your rates. Trust that you're learning. Keep going. What helped her the most wasn't just discovering Canva Pro and a decent pair of noise-canceling headphones. It was realizing that she didn't need permission to start small, that she didn't need to have everything figured out before taking the first step, that her worth wasn't determined by how long she'd been away from traditional work or how many gaps were in her resume. She tested a few tools before finding what truly worked. Time-tracking software to prove to herself that those scattered hours added up to something real. Project management apps that helped her stay organized across multiple clients. Templates that saved her time on repetitive tasks. Honestly, it changed everything. Not because the tools were magic, but because they gave her structure in a life that often felt This isn't a promotion, just something that made her path a little lighter. If you're standing where she once stood, wondering if you have anything valuable to offer, wondering if it's too late or too hard or too impractical, maybe these tools could help you too. She'll leave the links below if you want to explore them. But the real shift wasn't about tools or techniques or business strategies. It was about identity. About reclaiming the part of herself that existed beyond motherhood, not in opposition to it, but alongside it. About proving to herself that she could be both, present and ambitious, nurturing and independent, fully committed to her family and fully invested in her own growth. The guilt didn't disappear entirely. There were still moments when she wondered if she was being selfish, if her kids were missing out on something because she was focused on work, if she was somehow failing by not being available every single second of every single day. But then she noticed something. Her kids saw her working. They saw her taking calls, solving problems, earning money, building something from nothing. They saw her frustrated sometimes, but they also saw her persevere. They saw her celebrate small wins and learn from mistakes and treat herself like someone whose time and talent mattered. What kind of lesson was that? What kind of future was she modeling? She thought about the women who would come after her. The ones sitting in their kitchens right now, coffee going cold, wondering if they still had something to offer the world. She wanted them to know that the skills they'd been using to hold their families together were the same skills that businesses desperately needed. That starting small wasn't the same as thinking small. That the gap in their resume wasn't a liability. It was proof of their ability to manage complexity, adapt under pressure, and create value even when no one was watching. Then came the moment she didn't expect. A message from her first client, the one who took a chance on her when she was charging $10 an hour and had zero professional reviews. They wanted to refer her to a colleague. They said she'd become indispensable to their business. That they didn't know how they'd managed before her. She read that message 3 times, not because she didn't understand it, but because she needed to let it sink in. She was indispensable. Not because she was perfect, but because she was consistent, reliable, and genuinely invested in their success. When she poured her coffee the next morning, it was still hot. Not because the house was quieter or the kids were less demanding or her schedule had magically opened up, but because this time, she wasn't rushing through her own life, waiting for permission to start living it. She was building, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. Virtual assistance isn't the only path, and it won't resonate with everyone. But for mothers who feel trapped between wanting more and having no idea where to begin, it offers something rare, a low barrier to entry. Flexible hours that adapt to your life instead of demanding you adapt to them. Skills you already have, just waiting to be repositized and valued. This is educational and inspirational content, not financial advice. Your journey will look different. Your skills, your interests, your circumstances are uniquely yours. But if there's one thing her story proves, it's that you don't need to have it all figured out to take the first step. You just need to believe that your time, your talent, and your effort have value. Because they do. Tell us what part of her story resonated with you most, and where you're watching from. Your journey might just inspire the next one. Tell us which country or city you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.